There's no freaking way I'll be your lover unless has one of the most toxic relationships I've ever seen in a romance anime. The couple in this show is just as bad, if not worse, than the main pair featured in Horimiya or Please Put Them On, Takamine-san. Morally speaking, it's just as vile and problematic as the relationship and cultural exchange with a Game Center girl. After watching episode 2 last week and seeing the reception online, I just had to talk about the horribly written romance between the two lead characters, Renako and Mai. Before I get into that, though, let me quickly explain what this show is about for those that are unaware. The series centers on Renako Amari, a girl who has become close friends with a group of popular, extroverted girls at school. Determined to break out of her introverted shell and no longer be a loner, she tries to change herself going into high school. However, Renako soon finds herself overwhelmed when trying to socialize with her new friend group and retreats to the school's rooftop one day. It's there that the pretty, rich girl, Mai Otaku, saves Renako from plummeting to her death, and after a bit of talking, suddenly falls for her. Unfortunately for Mai, Renako doesn't feel the same way as her, and insists they stay friends. From there, the girls decide that they'll alternate days where they act as friends and lovers, with Mai tying her hair up on friend days. Through this unusual arrangement, Renako aims to prove that they're better off remaining as friends rather than romantic partners. Like a couple other series this season, this show has a great concept, but it's poorly executed and honestly wasted on this half-baked Yuri story. I normally wouldn't bother watching a series like this where the main focus is on a gay relationship, but I decided to give it a shot because the preview trailers reminded me of one of the funniest shows ever made, The 100 Girlfriends. That anime leaned into its ridiculous situations while also having some really sweet moments between Rentaro and his growing harem. There was a good balance between its absurd humor and genuine romantic scenes. This show, on the other hand, embraces the romance element to a much higher degree than anticipated, yet doesn't play into its comedy to the same extent. This is a shame because the comedy aspect is handled much better than the romance angle of Renako and Mai's relationship. The comedy is actually one of this show's strong points alongside the presentation. It's not amazing by any means, but there were a few moments that were fairly amusing. The humor is generally pretty simple, but Renako's reactions are often enough to make some of these jokes work. Aside from the decent comedy, this anime has a very solid production. Studio Mother has done a good job with the artwork and animation so far. Given how poor some of the writing is, I think it's fair to say that they're doing a lot of the heavy lifting, presenting the story in a way that's engaging for the audience. Of course, nice visuals and a handful of chuckle-worthy moments aren't enough to make a great rom-com series. One of the major issues with this anime is its pacing. The narrative moves along way too quickly, and the relationship between the two leads feels very rushed. Horimiya had the very same problem, but at least it did a better job of fleshing out its characters. Compared to that show, the cast in No Freaking Way is pretty flat so far, especially Renako and Mai's friends. The show doesn't really slow down enough to add some meaningful depth to any of them. At this point, the other girls are pretty forgettable and uninteresting, though not a lot of time is dedicated to anyone outside of the main pair. If their unconventional relationship were more compelling and Mai wasn't such a despicable character, then maybe I'd be more willing to overlook this show's awful breakneck pacing. Similar to what happened when Horimiya began airing years ago, most fans are enjoying the unusually fast pace of this series. When I see the anime community going crazy for a series with a hastily executed romance like this, it really makes me wonder whether some people just want instant gratification over a well-written, heartfelt story. The admiration fans have for these quick-moving rom-coms likely stems from the notion that many of these shows tend to progress too slowly. In some cases, that criticism rings true, such as with 2023's The Angel Next Door Spoils Me Rotten. That series was an absolute slog to get through due to its repetitiveness, dull characters, and painfully slow pacing. This was the anime that made me start to question my love for high school romances. I had to watch an adult rom-com afterwards as a way to detox from the frustrating childishness in that series. The first few episodes were solid, but unfortunately the relationship between the two leads was stuck at a standstill for far too long, and their interactions got very stale after a while. I vividly remember watching that show, wishing that one of them would grow some balls and make a move. By the time they finally did something, the season was literally over. The Angel Next Door could have benefited greatly from a rapid-fire approach. A couple more recent anime like Medica Kuroiwa is impervious to my charms and I'm getting married to a girl I hate in my class also could have been better with swifter pacing. In both of these series, it took nearly the entire season just for the main heroine to acknowledge her feelings for the male protagonist and work up the resolve to pursue him. When it comes to series like those where the progression of the romance element is minuscule, I can totally understand viewers feeling unsatisfied in that regard. However, sometimes simply making the narrative and core relationship snappier isn't always the best solution. In fact, doing so could be detrimental to the story and characters depending on the show. A perfect example would be Kaguya-sama: Love is War. The consensus regarding that show's pacing seems pretty mixed from what I gather. Some fans feel like the anime moves too fast due to how it skips a lot of chapters from the manga. Conversely, others believe that it's too sluggish because it took 3 seasons and a movie for the main characters to get together. There's also folks that maintain the show's pacing is fine as is in spite of the various omissions from the source material. As an anime-only watcher, I personally think that it's perfect and would push back against the criticism that the romance between Kaguya and Miyuki moves too slowly. The show's main hook involves the pair trying to get each other to confess their love first. So, if their relationship progressed as rapidly as Renako and Mai's has in No Freaking Way, it would literally break the series. Kaguya-sama's slower, more deliberate pacing is what gives it the time necessary to properly and thoroughly develop its characters and their relationships. Moreover, the steady pace of the show allows for a rigorous exploration of its central characters' psychology and personal lives. As the story progresses, the series gradually peels back the many layers of its 2 leads, revealing their strengths, weaknesses, anxieties, and internal struggles to the audience. Through Kaguya, Miyuki, and their other schoolmates, series author Aka Akasaka effectively illustrates why some teenagers find it difficult to confess their feelings to someone they love. Whether it be due to the fear of rejection, a lack of courage, or senseless pride, a perceived shortcoming, or simply a feeling of inferiority, there's a lot that might cause young people to stress over such a trivial matter, and the series demonstrates that wonderfully. The kind of deep, multi-character study found in an anime like Kaguya-sama would be extremely difficult to achieve in a faster-paced series, where there's significantly less time to fully explore the cast. From what I've observed over the years, most of these quick-fix rom-coms that the community easily becomes enamored with prioritize plot progression over character building. The plot tends to move briskly as the core relationship advances at an abnormally fast rate. In an effort to quickly get to the juicy moments they know their audience craves, easy-bake romances like Haramiya and No Freaking Way often rush an underdeveloped relationship at the expense of strong characterization. Although doing this has proven to be very effective at keeping fans satisfied in the long term, there are several drawbacks to this approach that generally makes these types of shows inferior to their moderately paced contemporaries. One such disadvantage is that it usually results in weaker, less interesting lead characters, because not enough time is allotted to truly flesh them out. Like I mentioned earlier, doing a full-blown analysis for each MC would be a Herculean task under the constraints of these fleet-footed romances. Another flaw common to these accelerated love stories is that viewers are given far less time to connect with the main duo individually before they become a couple. This may seem like a nitpick to some, but if a series doesn't establish its characters well beforehand and make you care about them separately, it becomes harder to get invested in their relationship going forward. Ironically, the biggest downside to this approach is that it can ultimately dilute the emotional weight of the very moments these shows seem so desperate to deliver. Sure, the intimate scenes might still be enjoyable, and the surprise of them happening earlier than expected boosts viewership and generates buzz online. However, by having such tender moments occur so quickly and frequently, these series risk trivializing something special between the protagonist and their love interest. The lack of build-up going into some of these scenes could also reduce their emotional impact. Slower-paced romances like Tomo-chan is a Girl and Blue Box have the advantage of building up to their big romantic sequences, which allows them to resonate with the audience on a deeper level. The immense satisfaction of watching a character you followed for dozens of episodes finally confess or share their first kiss with the person they love simply cannot be replicated in these quick-burn romances. This is the kind of payoff that only slower, more deliberate series like The Dangers in My Heart and My Love Story with Yamada-kun at level 999 can offer. Boku Yaba has a lot of amazing hype moments that wouldn't be as effective if the author decided to rush the story and the budding relationship between Ichikawa and Anna. It took 2 seasons for them to finally hook up, but it was definitely worth the wait. The same can be said for the scene where Kaguya and Miyuki kiss in Season 3 of Kaguya-sama. These pivotal moments just wouldn't be as impactful and significant if we weren't given the opportunity to learn about their insecurities and personal struggles beforehand. The emotional attachment that forms from watching these characters grow and interact with each other enhances the tender moments they share together, making them even sweeter. That's something that I think these quicker romance stories tend to miss out on by pushing things forward too rapidly. With that being said, A lot of these high-speed rom-coms would probably be much better if the authors let the relationships simmer for a bit and spread the intimate scenes out a little more. I understand doing that would go against the appeal of these shows, but I believe this approach could result in richer characters, smoother stories, and relationships that develop more organically over time. It might also help emotional moments hit a lot harder with the audience, since there would be more breathing room to lead into them. Without proper build-up, certain romantic gestures could feel unnatural and come across as meaningless fan service. Honestly, given how these anime like to fast-track the primary relationship, many of them might have been better off if the main characters were already an established couple, similar to 2022's Shikimori's Not Just a Cutie. Going the Shikimori route with these stories would allow them to still hit certain romantic beats at a steady rate without things feeling too rushed or unbelievable. The focus could then shift between focusing on the dynamics of their relationship and the obstacles they face as a couple. Perhaps the best example of what I'm describing would be a rom-com from a couple seasons ago called I Have a Crush at Work. Full disclosure before I continue, I haven't finished this series yet due to it not being available on any streaming services, so I may have to eat these words one day. That being said, from what I've seen so far, the show might avoid a lot of the potential pitfalls I outlined earlier, while still giving fans what they're clamoring for quickly. As you might expect from a swift-moving rom-com, the show skips a lot of the build-up to the main leads hooking up and getting intimate. However, the anime does a decent job establishing the nature of Masugu and Yui's relationship as they attempt to hide their office romance while at work. It also sets up the fact that they've known each other for about half a decade, which will likely make certain moments between them actually feel natural and sincere. Now that I've broken down the many flaws that fast-paced romances typically have and provided ways they could have been improved, it's time to switch gears and discuss No Freaking Way's incredibly toxic couple, Renako and Mai. To give the author some credit, the foundation their bond is built on is actually pretty solid and ties in well with their personal issues. Their relationship centers on mutual authenticity, embracing their true natures and accepting each other for who they really are. When Renako and Mai are alone together, they don't have to stress about how others perceive them. More specifically, Renako doesn't have to worry about fitting into a certain social circle, and Mai can drop the facade crafted around the image most people have of her. Simply put, the time they spend together serves as a brief respite from their troubles. All of this sounds great on paper, but unfortunately this relationship isn't as wholesome and healthy as one would expect. To be frank, Renako and Mai are a horribly written couple with weak chemistry and a one-sided power dynamic, in which Mai does whatever she wants with very little remorse for her actions. As I alluded to earlier, Mai is a really unlikable character due to her terrible personality and unethical behavior. Given her status, wealth, and self-awareness to the fact that things have always gone her way in life, she can come off as a bit self-entitled and arrogant. Mai can also be quite selfish and even a bit manipulative, as she takes advantage of how weak-willed Renako is and disregards her feelings about being in a serious relationship. Renako has made it abundantly clear to her that she wants a best friend, not a romantic partner. Mai may claim she's in love with Renako, but her inconsiderate, lustful behavior in a few scenes makes that very hard to believe. It also doesn't help that, outside of a few scenes earlier in the show, she treats poor Renako like an object she's destined to have, rather than as a romantic partner. Mai single-handedly shatters the integrity of this unorthodox relationship with her selfish, horny actions. And in doing so kind of proves that Renako is right, that they're better off keeping things platonic. Twice now, Mai has demonstrated that she lacks self-control, and is willing to trample over Renako's feelings to satisfy her own lecherous desires. She can swear up and down that her attraction to Renako isn't purely physical until she's blue in the face. But as the saying goes, actions speak louder than words, and her behavior suggests that she's misconstruing lust for love. After what she does near the end of the first couple episodes, no one can convince me that Mai genuinely cares about her. If she did, she'd honor Renako's wishes and show a lot more restraint. Case in point, Mai kisses Renako multiple times, despite her clearly not wanting her to. The first time was at the end of their date during the back half of the series premiere. Initially, when Mai tries to kiss her, she pushes her away because they'd only been dating for 3 days. Mai stops briefly, then assures Renako that she won't force anything on her. Except she has numerous times so far. In fact, immediately after she says that line, Mai catches her off guard and kisses her on the nose. Sure, it's not as major as a kiss on the lips, but that's beside the point. Mai dismisses her feelings about the matter and does what she wanted to do at that moment. Sadly, this is far from the worst thing she's done to Renako to my knowledge. In the second episode, she forces herself on Renako while they were soaking in the bathtub together. Before I discuss this particular scene, let me give y'all some much-needed context. So earlier that day, Renako and Mai go to an arcade and play some virtual reality games together. Later on, it starts raining, so they decide to leave, prompting Mai to drag Renako to a hotel so they can dry their wet clothes and freshen up. Once they finish undressing and the bathwater is warm, Mai practically forces Renako to get in with her, despite her clearly wanting to bathe alone. This is yet another instance where Mai prioritizes her own selfish desires over Renako's feelings. It's no coincidence that earlier in the episode, one of the activities Mai wrote down on her list of things she'd like to do with Renako was to take a bath together. She takes full advantage of their situation to cross a couple items off that list. Anyway, the bathing scene is one of the worst scenes I've seen in a Yuri anime since that dreadful cafeteria scene in I'm in Love with the Villainous with its Disney Channel after-school special writing. Now, to be fair, the beginning is actually pretty solid, with the girls chatting and taking a little moment to bond with each other. Unfortunately, Mai's inappropriate behavior completely ruins what could have been a nice, tranquil scene. At one point, she unclips her hair and corners Renako before proceeding to touch her. Renako is caught off guard by Mai's actions and makes it quite clear that she's uncomfortable with being touched by her. In response, Mai just giggles and tells her that she's being whiny. Overflowing with anxiety over this situation, she pleads nervously for her to stop, but like always, Mai just ignores Renako's emotions and proceeds to kiss her anyway. Then, following Renako's flustered reaction and a very brief exchange, Mai hugs her and suddenly kisses her again. This time, however, Mai doesn't let her go as she continues to kiss her. Eventually, Renako manages to get her to stop by putting her hair clip back on. This was a terribly written, poorly executed scene that has a fairly strong start, but is ultimately dragged down by a very forced, intimate moment between the girls. Series author Taran Mikami fails to leverage the atmosphere established earlier in this sequence and misses the opportunity to lean into the core nature of their relationship. Despite literally setting the stage for things to unfold organically, he foolishly drops the ball by having Mai act out of line again before kissing Renako. This scene unwittingly showcases some of her worst qualities and perfectly illustrates the troubling imbalance in their dynamic as a couple. Mai will always be able to do whatever she wants to Renako because she's too submissive and lacks the assertiveness to really push back against her. Due to her lack of empathy, selfishness, and opportunistic tendencies, Mai will certainly continue to take advantage of her weak-willed friend, never stopping to consider her feelings. In all honesty, these two don't belong together, not as friends and certainly not as a couple. Mai's many flaws prevent her from being the supportive companion Renako is looking for. They also inhibit her from being the selfless, respectful, and trustworthy romantic partner she should be. After what she did in the bath, Renako would be better off without her and could likely find a more suitable BFF among their other friends. In spite of Mai's lustful actions, a lot of fans really enjoyed the bathing scene and were praising this series for how it isn't holding back when it comes to its intimate moments. However, when I initially saw that scene, I was like,
Oh, hell no!
What Mai did to Renako during the moment surrounding their first kiss was actually pretty heinous and reprehensible. The show presents this part of the scene like a pure, wonderful interaction is occurring between the pair, but in actuality, what's being depicted here is closer to sexual than a mutual kiss. Now, some of y'all might be thinking I'm going overboard by saying that, but the fact of the matter is Mai caressed and kissed Renako without her permission. Renako's internal monologue even suggests that Mai would have done more than that if she hadn't stopped her. Considering how impulsive Mai can be, and the fact that having sex with Renako was on her girlfriend list, it's fair to assume that she would have gone that far with her. I think the author was aware of how this scene could be perceived in a bad light, so he attempted to downplay it with Renako's frantic reactions and internal dialogue. Based on the positive reception I've seen online, it seems Mikami's efforts to minimize the negative impact of this problematic scene were successful. However, for people like myself, the latter half of the bathing scene may still come across as distasteful and crude due to how Mai's deplorable behavior clashes with the tone and the accompanying music. A great way to make this sequence more palatable would have been to briefly switch to a more playful tone during the part where she removes her hair clip and begins touching Renako inappropriately. To signal this tonal shift, the studio would need to change the music to something more upbeat to reflect the new comedic tone. By temporarily changing the tone of the scene leading up to their first kiss, Mikami could have more effectively mitigated the unpleasant awkwardness that arises from specific moments during that sequence. Furthermore, the sudden switch in background tracks would help to better communicate to the audience that they shouldn't take some of Mai's actions too seriously. If certain moments had been presented in a lighthearted manner with a bit more humor, I probably wouldn't be as harsh on this scene as I've been so far. As it stands, it's hard not to take this sequence at face value and question the morality of Mai's behavior, especially when the show doesn't provide enough levity to make the off-putting parts of this scene more tolerable. Given what she did in the bath, I'm really surprised this scene didn't spark a mild controversy online. I was expecting to see a lot of negativity towards Mai when I read through comments on Reddit and YouTube, but as I mentioned before, the sentiment among fans has been overwhelmingly positive. So far, I haven't come across a single dissenting opinion on this particular sequence or Mai as a character. The fact that there is seemingly no discourse surrounding this scene among even the smallest subsection of the anime community is quite strange to me. I understand we all have our own tolerances and preferences when it comes to the content we consume, but from my perspective, it seems like many people are giving this series a free pass because it's a Yuri anime. If Mai was a boy instead of a girl, I believe the reception to the bathing scene in this series as a whole would be drastically different. Certain moments between the pair would suddenly be seen as distasteful by some people and might even turn them away from the show. Seeing a guy touch and kiss a woman without her consent would be much harder for some viewers to accept, so elements of the bath scene would probably need to be altered. Other scenes might need to be changed as well. Nevertheless, I imagine the same folks that harshly criticize and bash other anime with morally questionable characters and situations would instantly target this show because of Mai. Regardless of the character's gender or sexual orientation, what Mai did was wrong from both a moral and legal standpoint. So it strikes me as odd not to see those very same detractors critiquing and trashing this anime. Like I stated before, I get that everyone has their own tastes and sensibilities, but this type of selective criticism and outrage just reeks of hypocrisy to me. It would be nice to see some more consistent takes from certain folks in the anime community in regards to this show. Some people simply aren't keeping the same energy they had for other shows with content many would deem as problematic, like Mushoku Tensei, Re-Monster, or Cultural Exchange with a Game Center Girl. Viewer reception aside, the final scene of the second episode attempts to rationalize Mai's immoral behavior with a really stupid excuse. Outside the hotel, Renako brings up the fact that she lied about not forcing her to do anything. Mai's justification for what she did basically boils down to her waiting a week to forcibly kiss Renako so that it wouldn't feel like she forced it on her.
Like what?
I understand that she wanted it to feel natural, but nothing Mai did to her in the bath actually happened naturally. The amount of time she waited to kiss Renako is irrelevant. Mai could have waited for years, and it still would have been forced because of the way she went about it. They may have grown closer over the past week or so, but that doesn't automatically give Mai the right to get intimate with her without Renako's consent. Even if Renako is starting to like her a little by the end of the episode, that doesn't retroactively absolve Mai of any wrongdoing. Instead of patiently waiting for their next date where Renako might be more open to the idea of receiving her first kiss, Mai completely blindsided her on the night of a designated friend day outing, violating Renako's personal space and the terms of their agreement in the process. I assume that Mikami wants to start blurring the line between the pair being best friends and romantic partners early on, but this all just feels rushed and poorly written. As things stand, Renako and Mai are one of the most toxic couples to make their debut this year. Although the core of their relationship is fairly sound, their lopsided power dynamic, conflicting character traits, and lack of chemistry makes them a terrible match for one another. With that being said, I would love to know what you think about this pair and the series as a whole in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button, and if not, feel free to hit the dislike button. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.